Jennifer Cozy, and co-host this evening, along with Melissa Everett. Thank you so much to Starr Library, our gracious hosts. As always, thank you for bringing people together. So tonight we have kind of like a 1-2 punch. The first part, Melissa's going to give a presentation and give you a peek at what is happening from the state and region-wide. And then we are going to transition into breakout groups where we're actually going to try to take these very ambitious goals and try to understand what are we going to do here, right here in Rhinebeck Village. And we're really interested in your thoughts and what you think should be prioritized. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Melissa.
Okay, well, thank you everyone so much. I really think that Vanessa has a unique spirit of adventure and a unique ability to look really cool when she's jumping little things. So, if I'm blocking your view, raise your hand. What if I do this? Okay, great. So, many years ago, I got the insane idea that we should have a sustainability organization in the Hudson Valley. And I had just moved to Woodstock, I think I was the only person in 1995 who moved to Woodstock with a full-time job offer when IBM was shutting down and everybody else was bailing. And I said, oh, let's have some forums on sustainable development. And over the years, we've built Sustainable Hudson Valley as an organization that is positioned where environment and economy and community meet, which was a very open nothing in it for a long time, which wasn't that good for business. But we have embraced especially the issue of climate change, which is we need to be acting at a much faster pace, higher scale, greater ambition, greater focus. We all know this. And climate change is a threat multiplier. So if you're concerned about vulnerable people, if you're concerned about air quality, if you're concerned about habitat, whatever, climate change is where we can all come together. We were able to work in Rhinebeck and Red Hook and surrounding areas a few years ago when we did the Solarize campaign, and it's great to see Lori and other people that we worked with. That was about opening up the marketplace for solar for homes and businesses at a time when everybody thought it was a good idea, but nobody was actually buying any. And so we've always tried to be kind of opening up the next new thing and building a consensus and bringing people together. And as we've realized how many people there are to bring together, it gets harder and scarier. But over the last few years, we've hatched something that I'm really pleased to share with you tonight. And it is called a Regional Climate Action Roadmap and Toolkit. And it is a project that I hatched with some support from Council of Governments that the counties and the towns all belong to, with a network of nonprofit organizations and academics and stuff, to really look at where we were, where we need to go, and what we need to do, big picture. And so part of our inspiration was in 2019 when New York passed the nation-leading Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And can half the people in the room rattle off what that's about? Anybody want to?
Reducing emissions.
Yes, it's a statewide, potentially not as ambitious as California, but really not there. A commitment that over the next 20 years, we are going to decarbonize our economy. And I'll get to the slides in a minute, but just that was a kick to say, we're going to what? I think that with anything that huge, the first thing you need to do is uncork the imagination. Because we're all doing good work, but we're all kind of doing the next thing before us. or the thing we can get funding for, or the thing that we're not scared to do, or, you know, we're all kind of hanging in and stepping forward. But what we wanted to do was say, wait a minute, where do we have to get in the next 10 years and the next 20 years? And how do we align the small steps that we're all working on with a bigger process so we can build more collaboration, more common agenda, that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna flip a slide. So yeah, I kind of said that stuff, but you know, big enough to matter and small enough to implement is key. You know, we always think that there's something about the region or a group of towns or a cluster of businesses. You know, there are groups that are big enough that they pull you out of your comfort zone, but yet they're small enough that you can work together. Next slide. So these are some of the organizations that we were able to finagle into meeting regularly and thinking this process through. Next slide. And we really had 3 guiding questions. What's the critical path to New York's 2030 and 2040 climate goals? Who needs to be involved? And what can we who are at the table do to increase momentum? So it's not so much that we were trying to speak for the whole region, that would be obnoxious, but we were trying to understand ourselves and to model a sense of responsibility for committing to do what we could do. Next slide. So this is the basics of the climate law. Commitment to 85% reduction in carbon emissions from 1990 by 2050. Everybody know a gigawatt is like 1,000 watts, a whole lot of distributed solar energy, offshore wind, 9 gigawatts by 2035, lots of energy efficiency, lots of energy storage to stabilize the grid, and that goal has actually been doubled this year. And electric vehicle rollout goals have been set by the governor. Next slide. And so are we getting it? It's huge. You know, our world is not going to look in 10 and 20 years like it does now for one of 2 reasons. Either we do this and our technology is really different, or we don't do this and we're in really bad shape. So the State Climate Action Council is the body that administered this thing, coordinated by the heads of the DEC and NYSERDA. Some of you work in policy a lot, and you may have seen equally impressive policy-making processes. But so we had a Climate Action Council of appointed cabinet heads meeting regularly, advisory groups representing everything from, you know, urban disadvantaged communities in the Bronx to the shipping industry, all in meetings thinking about the impacts on their industries and what would it take in their world to make progress and what did they need. And they came up with a draft scoping plan, and they circulated it, and they got 35,000 public comments. And 10 or 20,000 were from fake environmental organizations from the fossil fuel industry, but a whole lot of them were from real people. And so they digested this stuff, and they came up with a final scoping plan that just came out. And I think I've got details of that a few slides down, but just to say, this doesn't happen every day. This is not something that some bureaucrats in a back room just kind of cooked up to spring on us. This is an amazingly methodically done process with a lot of modeling about how to get to the results and a lot of transparency. So transportation, the vision is that new LDV is light-duty vehicle sales, and 40% of bigger trucks and buses and stuff must be zero emission by 2030. That's 7 years. Substantial portion of personal transportation in urbanized areas by transit. And that translates to about 3 million new EVs on the road by then. And 2040, really a complete shift to electrification and to transit and walking and biking. Good luck, but we're gonna go for it next. So energy, you may have heard the phrase, green the grid and electrify everything. You can make electricity with renewable energy and you can omit combustion from it. That's the idea. And electric power is today way more efficient than combustion-based power. So I'm not, don't like get cross-eyed with the technical aspects of this, but a whole lot of solar distributed widely. That's so that it will be resilient on the grid. A whole lot of energy storage because the sun doesn't shine all the time, and storage is what gets us off of fossil fuels. Whole lot of building efficiency, and you can see the progression over the years. Next. And then the vision of the Climate Act, or really the commitment of the climate law, and I have to keep rewiring myself to say it that way, because this is a law that says we're going to do this. It's not just aspirational goals, right? We're going to shift most of our building stock to electrically heated and cooled. And we're going to insulate it like crazy so that that's efficient and doesn't overload the grid. And, we're starting to see, one, that's enormous, but two, there's amazing creative work happening, and that's what I want to get into. Have you heard of the city of Ithaca? City of Ithaca made a commitment to decarbonize all its buildings in 10 years. There's like 30,000 buildings or something, so it's 3,000 a year, and they put together a whole bunch of funding sources and a program, and they're going for it. So, next. It's huge, but collectively, we're figuring out how to make it happen. So the scoping plan, like I said, is a framework for policy and programs. It's, climate.ny.gov is not a bad place to spend your coffee breaks poking around to really learn. It's very well documented. I talked about the consultations that they did. The law makes a commitment, 35 to 40% of the dollars that are raised from state and private sources are to be directed in what they're calling disadvantaged communities. And that is the communities that are overburdened and under-resourced and the most vulnerable with climate change being a threat multiplier. So it's the places where the diesel buses and the diesel trucks are, polluting the kids' air, that kind of thing. And they've gone through a very methodical process, studying census data and stuff to define those areas fairly. And there's a map, and a lot of them are right in our midst. And so there's an opportunity as we're thinking about what to do about climate and what to do about our energy and our buildings, to think about what to do about inclusion and equity and public health and a whole lot of other good things. There is actually going to be created at the state level what they're calling an Office of Just Transition, so that, they've modeled how many industries are going to grow, and it's most of them. They've modeled where the job losses are going to be. 2 industries are going to contract. Can you guess what they are? Gas stations and fuel delivery, which is why you've gotten mailers from the propane delivery people about how bad this thing is. But I digress. But there is that level of commitment to help train industries for transition so that nobody gets left behind. So we organize this thing into 3 sections. And by the way, it is a mature draft on a website that will be available for folks actually to look at in the next week or 2. rapidly scaling solutions about how we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, regeneration and resilience, how we prepare for climate change and also kind of restore our environment, and then capturing community benefits, how we use these commitments and the resources that are flowing to improve our economy, education, quality of life, and environmental justice. So we came up with a series of things that, that we can do not waiting for state policy. And to clarify the purpose of this, there are lots of local and regional plans that are technically rigorous, that look exactly where you're going to put things, how you're going to zone, rules and policies and stuff. That's not the level that we've got to. This is really about what are some organizing visions for useful activities that lots of people can align and do and pull off. So the first one has to do with all the renewable energy that's got to show up somewhere. And how many of you have experienced in your neighborhood or in your town somebody kind of unhappy about a renewable energy proposition? Yeah. So Scenic Hudson, God love you, created a map analysis tool that lets people get together and look at options for land that's already disturbed rather than farm fields, and look at options and think together about where to put solar. And as kind of an outgrowth of what we were doing, an informal partnership of one of Scenic Hudson's staffers, somebody from Clearwater, somebody from New Yorkers for Clean Power, started doing map analysis classes with that tool. And they've worked with, I think, 40 towns to just get them starting to think about where the renewable energy should go, and then is there zoning in shape for that? And we want to organize that work more systematically to make sure that everybody's, knows where to prioritize it, can start working with community members to build comfort, and then make sure that all the zoning is right. And that also applies to hydro, which is, in large scale, its environmental harms have been realized, but there's beginning to be very low impact hydro installations that don't require dams. So there's all kinds of potential renewable energy sources that can be considered if we can really work on consensus building among environmental colleagues, communities, and maybe even the utilities, who knows? Yeah, I think we got that. Next, sorry. Trying to go fast enough to be interesting and slow enough to let you digest. So I just heard that electric car sales have finally hit 5% of new car sales. And people who are like market transformation geeks think that's some kind of a tipping point. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's starting to accelerate. But we've worked in the EV space a fair amount, and before the pandemic, trying to nurture the marketplace and finding people who really wanted an electric car, but the dealers didn't have them, or they weren't charged, they were in the back of a lot, or the dealers had them, but there was no charging, so the person didn't feel confident. So we came up with this concept, acceleration through coordination, which is to make the electric vehicle marketplace really work. You have to have educated and motivated drivers, charging availability, and motivated, knowledgeable dealers who aren't scared to sell the darn things. You have to have them all together. So you're looking at maybe the only person you know who has actually stood in the training room of a car dealership and done presentations on electric vehicles, and found that there are a lot of interesting, knowledgeable people who are curious and just needed some reassurance. One of the things that we're committed to is no more charging deserts, no more, that one place where Leola knows, where you're taking your electric car but you can't quite get past wherever the place is. And by the way, shout out to Mid-Hudson Pattern for Progress. They have just done a really meticulous study of the whole Hudson Valley, where there's charging, where there's gaps, where there's, chargers that are poorly priced or poorly located, whatever, to really push forward this work of getting everything set. Electric school buses are such a winner to fast track. There are federal grants that make them almost free for overburdened communities, and I think we may have got one school bus proposal in motion just by telling the right planning department that existed. There is more to electric transportation than the Climate Act has figured out, and I just have had the luck of falling into amazing companies. So a few years ago, I was introduced to the Center for Post-Carbon Logistics. Did you know there was such a thing? In Kingston, and it's a former baykeeper, mariner, boat builder, with a cadre of experts who designed or got built. If you've probably been on or seen the Solaris in Kingston, first Coast Guard inspected, fully solar without even a plug, passenger boat on the Hudson. And so they have a consortium of naval architects who are figuring out the next proof of concept boats. And they work with the Apollonia, the sail freight boat that brings the malt and hops up. But this is getting mainstream commercially in Europe, and there's beginning to be interest at the Federal Maritime Administration. So it's the kind of thing, we're dreamers for sure, but it's the kind of thing that I wouldn't be surprised if we could help get going. Renewably powered maritime applications. E-bikes obviously are helpful for people who don't have cars. I just heard about a wonderful program in, I think it's Ossining. It's a rent-to-buy program to help low-income people access electric bike transportation. So there's just a lot of creativity. Cynthia?
Yeah, and how about a solar ferry between Kingston and Rhinebeck?
Yes, which we have been talking about. Somebody just wrote an article in the Kingston Wire about that. We're like, yes, let's jump on that. But besides hatching some of these ideas, what this work has been able to do is just connect really unlikely collaborators. There are people in this room who are really sophisticated land use planning and policy professionals. There are other people who are really experienced dreamers and facilitators of crazy new ideas. And we're hoping that chemistry will lead to something useful. And the last thing I'll say on transportation, because I'm owning it, okay? So internal combustion to EV conversion as a possible industry. It has been absolutely a marginal, not possible industry, but it needs to be. Think about it. When you trade in your conventional car, where does it go? It doesn't go off the road. It doesn't, the emissions don't go away, just your guilt goes away. The emissions just go somewhere else. There's beginning to be commercial companies that are taking on one car design or another and figuring out the platform and how to ditch the motor and electrify them. So there's like a really growing concern on Long Island that's doing it for commercial fleets, and we're in touch with them. So, and the other thing about that, when you look at how much energy it takes to make an EV, it takes about 7 years to pay off the carbon debt of producing that EV before it really is carbon positive. Next. And so the last thing about transportation, I think probably the most relevant to here, is, you know, the Climate Act Scoping Plan says, in 20 years, we're going to have everybody using transit. You know, at least in the cities. But we're going to really radically shift that. That is, transportation planners in this room will know, that is hard. That hasn't been done pretty much. Maybe, you know, Malmo, Sweden has done that. But it's about making transit accessible and comfortable and safe and fitting with people's lifestyles. But it's probably also about better business models for running bus systems so that they can actually serve people. So there's a lot of creative planning and strategy that our regular professional planners just may not have time to do. And while you're flipping, I'll just tell one quick story about what's going on in our government agencies as they process this amazing change. I walked into transportation planning office for a meeting with my boat colleague from the Center for Post-Carbon Logistics with a beautiful proposal. And several county transportation planners said, "We are so excited. This is really wonderful. This is the wave of the future. We would love to support you. We're sorry we can't help you at all because we are so up to our eyeballs with all of the paper that we are processing just to receive the money that we're getting and receive the applications and move the money." So part of what has kind of pressed us forward on this project is the idea that more non-governmental brain trusts might not be a bad thing. The next topic is waste, which is 12% of our greenhouse gas emissions, just moving stuff. And you visualize trucks at 3.5 miles to the gallon, diesel-powered, taking your trash to Seneca Meadows and idling for 2 hours before they dump that trash, and 100 of them a day. That thing that looks kind of like a spider, that is a map of where all of our materials, our paper, our plastic, our glass, our metal, all that stuff go. So it's a really crazy, inefficient system. And we have found our way into thinking a lot about materials management, in part because we are the host of the Repair Cafe. And I know you have one here, and it's, you know, something we love dearly. But it's led us to think long and hard about what can be done. And you've probably heard the term circular economy, the idea that we don't just minimize, we don't just reduce waste and chip away at it. We try to redesign our systems so that they don't lead to waste. So the first materials management meeting we had on this project, the coordinator, the committee, just blurted out, "Stop transporting waste. That's our policy. We got to do that." So how do you do that? You know, we have met some with the resource recovery agency heads from our counties, and they work together and they talk together and they support each other in, you know, better waste diversion programs and stuff. But I said, what would it take to really shift the paradigm? And they said, we need enough common data to just understand what's going where. We all have data for our own counties, but we don't have a way to pool it, and we don't have the bandwidth to really work with that. So we threw an intern at that for a semester, and we got detailed materials flows mapping of, you know, where everybody's glass is going, where everybody's paper is going, and so forth. And they were over the moon happy. And we started, this is just an early exploration, the idea, what if we try to deal with one material at a time, you know, in a cooperative way among our counties and communities. And I'll give you one example of a low-hanging fruit and what I think would be exciting. Ground glass, pretty much all of it's going to Pennsylvania. There is a low-carbon concrete way of making concrete, which is one of the most greenhouse gas intensive manufacturing processes that there is. You can make it much lower carbon by using ground glass as a replacement for one ingredient. There's a company in Westchester County that does that. There is a demonstration project in the village of Hastings they've got a bunch of installations of low carbon concrete. They've got an ordinance to prefer it in their procurement. And other towns are beginning to take notice. So is there, an experiment with seeing how much local policy push we could get for low carbon concrete and begin to build that market for that glass. So that's the kind of stuff we've been thinking about. And it's, an economic development opportunity for that breakout conversation. So agriculture and forestry are big themes, and they are dear to the hearts of a lot of people here. And how many of us have seen Kiss the Ground? And just, it just makes you go crazy. One of the things I learned in this project is that lots of farmers are curious about regenerative agriculture, and there are plenty of demonstration projects, and there's work in carbon credits to finance it and all that stuff. But they need to see it, not just in theory. They need to see it on the kind of soil that they have and in the conditions that they have. So we've been strategizing with Cornell and Watershed Agricultural Council, and Carly from Scenic Hudson just found her way into our conversation, and looking at how to create a more systematic support system to get the proof of concept out and then get funding to the farmers as they're ready to scale that stuff up. And for everything I'm saying, there's plenty more I'm not saying because I'm really eager to get to the conversation. The scoping plan talks about how there's no way we're going to meet our climate goals if we don't conserve more land. And it talks about creating supports and funds and guidance documents and all kinds of things over the next couple of years. That'll be great. I think that what you and Rhinebeck are doing with your comprehensive plan conversation is really critical to say, where can we really conserve more land? What can we do to inspire more people to take that more seriously? There's all kinds of smart growth and transit-oriented development. It's all stuff we've been doing for 20 years or 30 years, but it seems like there's a resurgence of needing to do it well and better and not be jaded and really go for it. And so it's partly about place and investing in our places, and Cynthia Nick Keaton, our Resilient Places strategist, is here because we're doing a training about placemaking at the Kingston Library January 25th and February 8th that we would love you to talk to Cynthia about. Because when you get into thinking about climate resilience, there's a lot of planning work going on, a lot of strategizing on managing for storms and floods and stuff. What there isn't is enough work at the neighborhood scale. And government's never going to be able to do that. When we have heat waves and we have floods, we're going to take care of the riverfront, but we're not going to be able necessarily to take care of everybody's neighborhood. And so we think that part of what has to happen is more of a train the trainers model, more of a kind of infusing understanding of how to stormproof and floodproof our neighborhoods, how to create more response systems that are more informal and neighborhood based. And there's a concept, Urban Sustainability Directors Network came up with this idea, a resilience hub. So it might be the library and 3 or 4 buildings around it, or it might be, your school and the park and, some commercial buildings. An area where you can concentrate your, your cooling center or your emergency response center, put some solar and storage on it, put a rain garden around it, demonstrate a lot of these climate smart features in one place and make it welcoming to the community. And the Climate Act Scoping Plan people did a bunch of rigorous math about how many jobs will come out of this. 189,000 estimated by 2030, after the gas stations and the oil delivery people are subtracted out. That's pretty amazing. It's not going to be easy because you might know we already have a labor shortage. We have a disconnect and a lot of people who could be working who are not supported to really find their way into the workforce. So there's going to need to be, in the kind of housing, quality of life, youth development, all that arena, there's really going to need to be communities coming together to make sure that we have the workforce. I was talking a few weeks ago with the head of an energy efficiency company who said, there are so few people trained for what we do. I train people and then they go start their own businesses. I hire people from temp agencies and they may or may not send them. I hire people from prisons. I'm 62 years old, I'm crawling in attics. We really need help with our workforce. So that's really something I just want everybody to be mindful of. But there's not just one green economy. And I've been excited to realize the layers of this. There's what I just talked about, the decarbonization economy, the EVs and the energy efficiency and stuff. There's also the bioeconomy, farms and forest products and biochar and structural materials for buildings from the forest. And the state scoping plan calls for doing a big strategic plan and really looking at how to grow and support those industries. So in a place like Rhinebeck, where you have so much of that, that's a really important thing to be tracking. There is the third one is the circular economy, and that is where we are, turning waste to wealth. And the fourth one, which just occurred to me, but I think we should have it in mind, it's the resilience economy. It is the backup power and the greenhouses and all the stuff that we want to have to keep our places secure. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say one other thing about that. So we were lucky enough to have several economic development directors in this brain trust, which blew my mind. But we talked about what it will take to grow these economies. So it's supporting the industries like the solar installers and the energy efficiency people in growing. It's connecting them, especially with other businesses that are ready to use their services. Get all the restaurants, all the hotels, and everybody to pony up. It's helping to build their workforces. And then it's helping to grow the markets with policies like the concrete thing I mentioned, or low carbon building codes all over, and conversion programs so that the people in the declining industries will have options. How are we going to pay for all this? There are more funding resources than most of us know. The New York Green Bank is out there to, de-risk green building deals and stuff. The scoping plan has this very interesting comment that NYSERDA has a bunch of partner energy lending banks, but they're saying, lender apathy. Nobody cares, and that's a problem. But even if all the lenders cared, there isn't enough of a pool of capital to really do especially the building thing. We found one proposal that is being prepared for legislation this session. Very bright guy, Mark Thiel-King he's the Bedford, New York Energy Coordinator, but he's also a sort of finance consultant. And he and a group of folks have realized that there is a model for issuing municipal bonds to fund some of this stuff. So the Environmental Facilities Corporation, you may know, towns they're approved to issue bonds for water quality because it's a public good. And so this group figured out, wait, climate safety is a public good and air pollution reduction is a public good. So why can't we authorize the same thing? So NYSERDA has given them some funding to ripen the concept in the hope that it can turn into legislation this season. So hopefully by being networked together, we can all be sharing the creative ideas that are coming forward as folks are realizing both the challenge and the incredible opportunity. And to me, the environmental justice opportunity, that has been central for the last couple of years. We last year hired Reverend Gregory Simpson, who was coordinating the Hudson Valley Environmental Justice Coalition, to just do a dive and talk to as many community-based organizations, civil rights organizations, and so forth as he could. And he got 81 of them, and really, came back with a sense that nobody wants to be called disadvantaged. Most of the level of conversation we have isn't helpful to people who are working two jobs. But the opportunities that are moving through in this time of change are really of interest. And so there is money to reduce energy bills. There is money for transportation alternatives. There is money for healthier, safer homes. There are programs like Climate Justice Fellows. It's a new NYSERDA funded program that will pay $37,000 of salary for a person from a disadvantaged community to actually be hired full-time and mentored by an organization to learn about clean energy. That's pretty amazing. So we've been working especially closely with Newburgh, but to some extent in Kingston and Poughkeepsie, with green economy employers that are ready to grow and community organizations that are trying to channel people into opportunity, and with the idea that we can work on resilience in our local communities in ways that create business for those companies and employ some of those people. So anyway, it's a really exciting conversation that a lot of people are involved in. This is just a summary. I won't even go into it. But what we try to hatch with this project is a series of doable projects and programs that are realistic for nonprofit partners, local governments, public-private partnerships to really go for. And we're finding our way into a number of them. We're working with Ulster County on a green economy network that has about 50 businesses in it. We're working with them as well on a reuse innovation center to work on the circular piece of it. But we're hoping that in the coming weeks, as we publish this thing and do more of these kinds of conversations, we will really find lots more organizational partners that are saying, oh yeah, we could do some of this kind of stuff. We don't think that we're going to create one big kumbaya partnership and try to structure it. That would be kind of silly. But we do think that there is a kind of a network model that we might be able to pull off to bring collaborators together informally to bake these projects and get them moving. And in the meantime, at a minimum, what we want to do when this thing is published in the next few weeks is reach to partners that have participated or have heard about it and offer 3 ways to get involved. One is just endorse the vision and the timeline to 2030 and 2040 and say, yes, we believe this and we're committed to it in our work. The second is to commit to participating in any of the projects that we're trying to bring forward. And the third is to join a Learning and Action Network that we're creating. There's a new platform you may know, Hudson Valley Climate Action Network. It's a project of Partners for Climate Action, and they're here tonight. They brought the plates. And it's just a very handy online, place for threaded discussions and storing stuff. And so we're wanting to bring potential collaborators in there. And we see all of this as an experiment. And it wouldn't work without a whole lot of partners and a whole lot of feedback. So I thank you for listening to all of that. And I am happy to move to the feedback part with a few questions or comments, whichever you think. No.
I was told a few years ago by someone who's been involved in this community that we do not have enough consistent wind for really effective wind energy replacement of. And also, I did not hear tonight you say anything about geothermal.
That was my oversight. Geothermal is rocking. And not only the price is coming down, the drilling techniques are getting much more sophisticated, and the state is starting to fund pilots for district scale, like a loop around your neighborhood. So that's not ready for prime time yet, but that's a direction that could help a lot. There isn't consistent wind in most places around here. Offshore wind has been a big investment, and there is massive offshore wind development, and then some in central New York.
I just want to make a comment about, I live in Pleasant Valley. We have a lot of farmers who have farmed for a long time. And now all they're doing is haying their fields. Because that's all they want to do, because they're old, they're in their 70s. There's a long back. But, that's all they want to do. It's what they can do, and they can get their sons and grandsons and whatnot to help them, and they'll put it in their barn, and that's how they'll make a little bit of extra money besides their Social Security. So, to talk to them about, doing regenerative farming is like, why would I want to do that? Because this is all I want to do now.
There are people in this room who know so much more than I do about this topic, but I think the key point is that none of this is going to happen by making people do stuff. What's going to happen is finding incentives, supporting the next generation of farmers, finding the places where they do want to do it and getting it moving, and going from there. Yeah.
Does anybody cover where we can, as individual households, where we can go and purchase things that are optional to plastic, for example, and other household products? Because I'm confused when I go online. I don't know which are the best products to order.
Where is Dorna?
I have a recommendation for you. The Ozone in Red Hook is an amazing place. You gotta go check it out.
Yeah.
Bulk refill station, tons of products that are low packaging. Dorna, you have anything else?
Oh, I don't know, just, you're the goddess.
Dorna knows all.
I was going to say,
Yeah, and for energy stuff, we publish the Clean Power Guide annually, and there's copies of that will help you out in that domain. One more?
grid. As we're dumping more and more power into the grid and pulling more and more power out of the grid, you hear these horror stories of our grid is poorly maintained, ancient. You know, we have all these millions of miles of extension cords crisscrossing the country.
All true. It's a problem.
It is a problem. And so is there, as part of all of this electrification conversation, is there also a conversation going on about, you hear about
Oh, yeah.
but
So at the very
No more.
beginning, within months of when the Climate Act was passed, the state did a couple of just big things. One was to create an Office of Renewable Energy siting to sort out all the disputes. The other was to commission the joint utilities to do a study on how they're going to upgrade the grid. It's 800 pages. I haven't cracked it, but they're working on it. And I think the issues of who pays and how it's equitable and how it's sequenced are really important. But yeah, it's between the state, the Public Service Commission, and the utilities, lots of conversations are happening. And partly the sequencing of how much renewable energy we can roll out at a time is dependent on how that works.
I just have a comment to make. I'm on Climate Smart, and we have a number of people on our Climate Smart, including me, that has bought into a farm. I don't have without cutting down a lot of trees, which I won't do. So I can't put solar on my roof. But I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And when I call them and find out why this is available, and that's why I signed up for that one, because it had availability, it wasn't sold out, and I wasn't waiting. They're saying that it's the utility, and of course we have Central Hudson, and you can't get any answers out of Central Hudson as to why they can't get.
Michelle Hinchy.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that there are many rules and many power struggles, and the thing we would most like to be part of is opening up the conversation and requiring more disclosure about what the constraints are and what kind of steps could be taken. But let us not, let us not go there. Let us have very other place for us to go.
Just to clarify the question though, were you asking about community solar? Is that what you're on the waiting list for?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's a solar farm.
Oh,
It is a
okay.
community, it is
Yeah.
solar, but it's a solar farm. And I'm
Yeah, and they have, substation limitations and queues and all that stuff. One more, and then we're going to shift into something really special.
What with the new Biden plan and a lot of money going into alternatives, the infrastructure bill and whatnot, what is the advice as to the resources for the homeowner seeking solar now?
Tax credits are rolling out.
Melissa, could you
Yes.
repeat the
Oh,
question?
for homeowners, solar, the American Inflation Reduction Act. What do we know about how to capture the benefits? I am going to refer you to the coolest resource I've ever seen. It is a watercolor of all of the tax credits distributed around a house. NicoleKellner.com is this artist who put this together with simple household guidance. There's other stuff. There's stuff in our Clean Power Guide, but it is basically a series of tax credits with some moderately complicated rules around them. But yeah,
See page 5 of the Clean Power Guide.
see page 5 of the Clean Power Guide. All right, so here's really the thing that I want to go to. We are just the classic group of thoughtful, committed citizens trying to do something more useful and to kind of make a roadmap that we could use and that others could use. This kind of thing is daunting and humbling technically, but it's inspiring because it brings you in touch with the most amazing people, and it really is a reminder of the level of vision and visionary leadership that we have in our midst. And in a moment, hello,
Am I looking for?
So we're going to have like a botched surprise in about a minute. But meanwhile, I want to thank Mayor Bassett for being here, as well as other public officials here. Hey. Yeah. All right. So we thought we were going to have a brilliantly orchestrated recognition of our sponsors, Jeff Scales and Leo Lespect. But we are screwing it up. And I am mortified. But our office hosts and supporters, you all know Jeff and Leola, have been an amazing force behind this. They have believed in us from the beginning. They have adored us when we're crazy. They have created a nurturing place for us to be, and we just can't thank them enough. But we want to thank them. Could have been smoother, but
Thank you, Melissa, Barbara, and the Sustainable Hudson Valley team, as well as the entire community, because it really takes everyone.
Okay, we love you.
Mention your food, your waste storage bin there.
Oh, be sure to recycle
Recycle
your
bin.
toothbrushes, toothpaste tubes, razors, Brito, wine corks, phone cases in our special item recycle drop-off, 7 Livingston Street parking lot, 24/7.
All right. All right. 7 Livingston, everybody.